Is it too late right now?
No, I just wasn't expecting you.
Yeah, I was just in the neighborhood. I know this is weird. I would just, I wrote this monologue, and I just wanted to come by and get a second opinion about it.
Yeah, right now?
Yeah, if you have time. You don't want to...
Yeah, no, I'm not doing anything.
Okay.
Do you want a chair?
Yeah, I can grab this first.
I'm gonna get a beer. Do you want one?
Yeah, okay.
Is that the story?
Yeah, I don't have a title for it yet, so whatever you think the title is, that's what it'll be.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm still, like, revising it and everything, so...
Yeah, just read it.
It was in 2009 when I was in middle school, and our class took a trip out to an amusement park in Rye, New York, and it's a day that I think about a lot. Mary Ann was wearing her red dress, and she sat in the back of the bus. I sat up front with Mrs. Turner and the bus driver. I yawned and noticed there was lint all over my shirt, and I started to pick at it, hoping Mary Ann hadn't noticed. On the bus, I got bored pretty fast, and I zoned out thinking of what certain celebrities would look like having sex, which is what I always thought of on the bus. I got worried that I was becoming a sex addict, but then remembered that you probably couldn't be a sex addict if you hadn't even had sex yet. I remember thinking of what it would be like between the bus driver and Mrs. Turner. When we got to Six Flags, I was the first one out of the bus. I waited by the side for Mary Ann, and she came out in her red dress, with a dandelion in her hand. "You want to go on the Cyclone?" I asked. She responded without even looking up at me. "Eileen, you know you can always pick a flower to end on 'He loves me'?" I didn't know how to respond, and so I just pretended that I hadn't heard her. Mrs. Turner took out her blue folder, and she showed the guy at the stand all of our passes, and as soon as the gates opened, we charged into the park. I myself sprinted to the gate of the Cyclone. I swung myself into the seat, and I waited for Mary Ann to step into the seat next to mine. Then this teenager starts coming up towards me, and he leans down beside me with his name tag dangling right above my knees. And I leaned back to see if Mary Ann had somehow gotten lost on her way to my seat. Then I hear this click, and the next thing I know, the roller coaster starts up, and the forward motion of it violently shoots everyone forward way out of sync. At the peak, I looked down for any red dot that might have been Mary Ann's red dress, only to see her laughing with Miguel Tolero at the popcorn stand. I sighed and decided to put my hands up to try and enjoy the ride. But the second the ride was over, I decided I had not enjoyed the ride as much as I would have liked to, and so I got right back in line. From the back, I heard Miguel Tolero yell, "I'll catch you in a couple rides," and I came to the conclusion that Mary Ann was standing right behind me. The line moved slowly, and I refused to look back. I remember thinking, how are you supposed to dedicate yourself to something you can't see? Then finally the teen unlocked the chain, and we all rushed onto the roller coaster. I didn't look back to check if Mary Ann had made it in. I just got in my seat in the back and I pulled the bar down. Sure enough, Mary Ann slid into the seat right in front of me and pulled the bar down just as I had. I made very sure to look above, not at her head. And after the teen came around pushing all our bars down, making sure no curious 10-year-old is going to accidentally fall out, the roller coaster began to go up. And then Mary Ann put her arms up, and I wanted to tell her that she was too early, that you're supposed to put your arms up when the roller coaster goes down. As it went on, Mary Ann kept her arms stiff, and in a single swift motion, the roller coaster floored it down the hill, I myself didn't even enjoy the fall. I was so upset that Marianne was such an idiot, she had her hands up the whole time. Then the roller coaster was steady at the peak for a second. And before I had time to look away, she turned around and looked right at me. And I noticed how insanely dry my lips were, and how much they felt like the corners of my bedroom. Nothing like a mouth that produced anything, but only where the face, like the bedrooms, met themselves in these dry, massless corners. And then I thought of how quiet a small bedroom can get. How it can get so quiet you jump at even the thought of saying anything worth hearing. But then Marianne smiled, looking right at me, and even outdoors it felt the way it feels when a kid finally replies to the teacher who's been waiting far too long for an answer. And you can actually feel all the fears suctioned out of the room in a rather pleasant breeze. For a second, the roller coaster dangled in midair, and I forgot it was supposed to fall. But before I knew it, kids were getting out of the roller coaster, filing back out to the park, and the bars were all up, and Marianne was back in line for the ride again, and so I jumped out of my seat and I filed right behind her. I watched her refuse to turn around, and I decided that I'd sit next to her. When I got into the seat next to her, she smiled straight ahead, and after we were buckled in, she started saying something. I couldn't hear anything she was saying, and so I remembered just watching her. How her face was moving, her cheeks perspiring, and how she'd look up, squinting her eyes when forgetting a detail. I remembered how my mom used to say that the best observers were the people who didn't like where they were sitting. Then I began wondering how to flirt. I remember thinking it was strange to be wondering about this right now, and yet I thought of how when I watch adults flirt, I saw that no one was ever really listening and no one was ever really talking, because we know. And I guess they know that words were only ever an excuse. Then the ride was over, and I hadn't even noticed that Marianne was done talking. But by then it was too late. I don't know what Marianne knew, but she knew. And I blushed, and I said, "I'm sorry, I completely zoned out." Marianne didn't even bother asking what for. She just got out and started to walk to another ride. And I got back in line, and I just watched her, wishing that I knew better, greater words. But then we heard Miguel Tolero come around saying it was time to go back. And we got back onto the school bus where I just sat with Mrs. Turner feeling a weird feeling. And I watched Marianne follow Miguel Tolero to the back. And for some reason, how I felt in this bus ride back to school was how I'd feel on the train rides to and from high school. For whatever reason, this feeling is most distinct in the train rides to and from high school. I remember I'd lean against the windows and watch the E-train pull into Columbus Circle, come to a halt, and then slowly begin to pull away. And then you know how if you look at the train leaving the station a certain way, it can look as if your own stationary train car is moving along with it. But then that train is gone, and you see that your own train car was actually standing still all this time. And it was always this moment that I'd imagined that the train had been sitting and had never moved. And that it was always the trains across from me which arrived and departed, and arrived and departed, and that it was only in the midst of their arrivals and departures that I'd felt I was moving too. And I'd sit in this train, and I'd fall asleep to the racket of trains arriving and departing, wondering whether my own train car had ever moved. Way later, after Marianne and I both graduated middle school, we never talked again. And of course this wasn't due to the fact that we had nothing to say to each other, things just turned out that way. From time to time, though, I thought about her and all the other people that I had never said much to. People like Marianne that I didn't talk about him, but later there was Eric in high school, and then later down the road there was Owen and then Danny. And there were always people like that. People you'd have wanted to know for a long time, but the way things worked out, you only got to know them in passing. And somehow, sometimes it was nice to have memories like that. Of people you could have known.
There's a way to say goodbye, and if I knew it, I'm sure I would try. There's a way to say hello, but since you've been gone, there's no way to know. Since you've been gone, they've changed the toll. My dad's lost our dog, and our winter's still cold. I've sure moved on, but never moved up. Back where I've started, only now I've got backups, more warm-ups, some breakups, less grown-up, more makeup, and still somehow hung up on you. Dad saying chin up while friends yell bottoms up. There's a way to say goodbye, and if I knew it, I'm sure I would have tried. There's a way to say hello, but since you've been gone, there's no way